So what I'm doing today is I am scouting out a place where I can do some hunting. Probably not squirrels, maybe rabbits, possibly some quail. I'm just looking for a place I can set up a camp. So let's check it out. So I got some gear I'm going to unload, and then I think today I'm just going to sit down and talk to you guys a bit about how things were in the Depression out here where we are, and do a little video about that, have a little bit of a discussion, and so we'll go from there. All right, so what I want to talk about is during the Depression, when people went out hunting and scouting for food, fishing or whatever, they brought a lot of stuff along with them. And what a lot of people are not talking about is, and I think it's a very important thing, is that when you go out fishing or hunting with your family and you're expecting to get some quarry, you got to be real careful because you could end up going hungry on that trip. You got to take some food with you. And what I wanted to talk about is prices during the Depression. Now, my dad is 93. He's still alive, still pretty sharp. His older brothers, which were a bit older than him, I grew up with, you know, of course, my dad and all his brothers and everybody all through the 60s, 70s. And one of the things that my uncle asked me about, and I didn't ask him, he asked me, you know, how were the prices in the early 70s? And what he told me was that during the Depression, you could get a can of sardines and probably a rack of crackers. You get a rack of crackers in a box, and you know, of course, sardines and a small pack of Bull Durham, all for under $1. He was asking me, okay, how are the prices, you know, in the 70s, and you know, with that, and in comparison, you know, and of course I told him, well, you know, probably $3-4 you could still, back then, you could still get a can of sardines and a rack of crackers. And I actually I've always chewed Copenhagen snuff, and I think when I started chewing, of course I started way too early, I started chewing at 14. I think it was 18 cents a can when I first started buying it. And my point is that we've made a lot of fishing trips and done a lot of things, and we thought, oh, well, we don't need to bring food. We're gonna have fish to eat. Well, that ain't how it works. So we're over there out on the coast for a day and a half and didn't catch jack shit. So you got to, you know, with these squirrel camps and everything that everybody's doing now, that is a demonstration of how it was during the Depression. You got to be real careful because people were smarter than that back then. They always took, you know, even a can of beans was a little more expensive, but you could still get a can of beans and a loaf of bread and a little bit of tobacco for under $1. And that brings me to a couple other points. Now, a lot of the guys that are doing these squirrel camps are, further east than I am. I'm on the West Coast. Now, on the West Coast, things were way different. However, there was plenty of resources and food. Turns out that the Monterey, some of the canneries, fish canneries down there, were producing 4 million pounds of sardines a year during the Depression. I mean, that's a shocking number, and that's a lot of sardines. The other thing is that a lot of people don't think about is there was money and resources for some people. The people that were hurting were the ones that were working, and kind of the hard-working blue-collar people that did construction, did other various things. Farming was kind of thin, but if you think about it, Henry Ford built Model A's, and he must have built thousands of them in 29, 30, 31, 32. I mean, the 32 Deuce Coupe is one of the most popular cars today for hot rods. And there's plenty of them around. There's still a lot of them around. There's a lot of Depression era stuff around. Now, when I was growing up in California in the 60s, there was nothing here. I mean, we didn't have Gavin Newsom and a bunch of idiots running the state like we do today. And there certainly wasn't a lot of homeless people. There were a few hobos around. In our town, we had one hobo. Everybody knew him. Everybody gave him food, gave him firewood. And he kind of lived on an old ranch. It turned out at the end of the day, his daughter showed up and got a hold of him, and he had a bunch of land. He was actually quite wealthy, but he was just not all together. And of course he was by himself, so he kind of was struggling a little bit. But we kind of need to think back, and we talk about survival today. Oh, you need this and you need that, and you got to have 20 different survival items and yada yada yada. You got to look at what people did in the old days. During the Depression, they didn't have ferro rods. They had blue tip or strike anywhere matches if they were lucky, and maybe a candle stub in their pocket, a little bit of tobacco, and they were good to go. They would go work for, they literally would work for food. Go along the railroad tracks and harvest stuff, forage for stuff along the railroad tracks, and grab whatever they could to make hobo stew. And so back to my uncles, they lived in the Depression. They literally lived in the Depression, and how they made it is really the same way people made it during the Second World War. They had little, my family was rural, but people in town, in inner areas and cities, had little victory gardens where they'd have rabbits, chickens, little vegetable garden. That goes a long ways, and that's what we need to do today. The problem with today is all of our food is corrupt. It's all got, hormones and steroids and plastics and chemicals and God knows what's in it. And I kind of understand why people are kind of the way they are today. It's what we're eating. We're screwing ourselves up. Anyway, so I'm kind of ranting a little bit. Probably in a few days, I'll pack all my gear in my old truck and figure out exactly where I want to set up a camp. And what I'll do is I'll go through all my old gear. I got a ton of old gear. I mean, you want stuff from the Depression? I got tons and tons of stuff. I mean, because of my old uncles and everything, I inherited everything. And I ended up with all their old crap. My older uncle had a barn. He got arthritis real bad. He closed up his barn in 1949 and never opened it. And it wasn't opened until I opened it, probably, I want to say in the 80s, 84, 85. And that thing was packed full of stuff. I mean, there was everything in there. Lanterns, old motorcycles. I mean, just tons of stuff. And I pretty much cleaned it out. And of course, I collected all the old stuff. They weren't into old stuff. A lot of people today are still not into old stuff. They're kind of into this new plastic internet world, I would call it. But the old school stuff is really fun. So, in a few days or a week or so, after I scout out today, I'm gonna probably set up a camp and drag out a bunch of stuff, and I'll go through all that gear and show you what's going on with it and what it's all about. So that being said, so I don't drag this video out too long, I will probably see you in the next video. This is Craig Rivers with Rivers End Outdoors. Bye now.